All right, welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shaunna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, we've got a busy week ahead, so I don't know how much news you've had the opportunity to take in, but we got some stuff to talk about, don't we?
Yeah, well, I just feel like the fire hose of news is just ongoing, right? Like, I'm not,
Isn't
very
that the
rarely
truth?
am I like, oh, look, a kitten that got saved from a tree. That's really nice.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I did stop for the bear that was found in a tree here in Maryland, but anyway, I won't get us sidetracked. But yes, I feel what you're saying. I feel what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, let's get into it for this week. You all know we never run out of topics to discuss. And let's get into our word of the week. So, our word of the week, again, we've alluded to this in previous episodes, but we really didn't dig into it. And so we just wanted to give this a little bit of extra attention, if you will. And our word of the week or concept is American exceptionalism. American exceptionalism. And it's this idea that the United States is fundamentally unique compared to other nations. And that includes not only just existing uniquely, but also how it developed over time, and also how we flesh out the mission of being this country. So, what makes us unique? And so, there is some posturing, I would say, Dr. Lisa, around we are exceptional because we are born out of this resistant radical revolution in stark opposition to, right? So that's one thing. The way that our founding documents were written, like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which almost makes me want to cackle right now because we currently have a
Right.
presidential administration that literally does not care about any of that.
Right. Right.
Liberty, democracy, individualism, equality, all these things that I feel like are
Mm-hmm.
fundamental to who we thought we were, but you know, my grandmother says all the time, I know who you are by what you show me, not what you tell me. What we're being
Yeah.
shown right there is
Yeah.
this ain't it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa, this kind of throws back to Alexis de Tocqueville that talked about this in the 1830s around this society being built on these democratic ideals and egalitarian ethos, and really was established to be contrary to European nations. And so,
Right.
Lisa, with that, I know you're well traveled. I attempt to be very well traveled and we're well read. I just think this is, I can't say that I would laugh as hard previously than I do now as I listen
Mm-hmm.
to the definition of American exceptionalism and how it's literally playing out in our faces right now.
Yeah, I mean, I had learned about de Tocqueville and American exceptionalism when I was an undergraduate in doing political science and American studies. And
Yes.
it's definite. I mean, it's always been a little bit of a fallacy, I think. I mean, but now I think that kind of separation from those fundamental principles is really stark. And what has historically made us exceptional as a nation is now leading us to be exceptional among Western democracies in our retreat
Mm-hmm.
to authoritarianism, right? So it's kind of been
Mm-hmm.
turned on its head a little bit. And also, I think being used as this kind of elitist, we're better than you, especially Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And we're
That's
just going to
right.
protect our own, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just think it's so laughable. And we wanted to make sure that you all knew um, when you hear this language,
Yeah.
what it
Yeah.
originally was intended to be and how that is interesting compared to what we're experiencing, the news headlines and how it's playing out.
Mm-hmm.
I, we on this podcast have no problem being resistant. In fact, we encourage it, but mm,
Yeah.
it's gone a tad too far, don't you think? So we'll talk about this more, but we wanted to give you this fundamental as we move forward into phase one. So, Lisa, for phase one, I wanted to lift up a Instagram post that I saw that I
Okay.
saw the post. It looked really innocent on the surface,
All
Lisa,
right.
but then when I started digging around, it's like, oh goodness, this is
Okay.
gonna get interesting. And so Prada Jones is a African American male real estate investor that I follow on Instagram, and he brings up lots of topics about, of course, connecting from real estate and wealth creation, generational wealth, all these different
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about these topics all the time, but this most recent quote, he said, "The American dream now is," and then he gives a list: no debt, a safe home, not hating your job, food with actual nutrients. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
not too much to ask, right? And he says it kind of tongue in cheek. And when I started thinking about that list, I'm like, wow, the the ways in which we have normalized that entire list, even to the point like some people truly don't blink at the amount of debt that they need to incur. And I'm not talking about
Right.
irresponsible folks. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about folks that just simply need to live. They need to
Yeah.
work their way up the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And it's unconscionable how much debt we acquire for legitimate reasons, home
Mm-hmm.
ownership that we acquire, through debt for legitimate reasons. We've already talked about this in a previous podcast. Overemployment in ways that try to chip away bit by
Right.
bit at the debt, or at least keep ourselves afloat. The cost of food, in the
Mm-hmm.
face of everything that's happened with farming in this country, and
Yep.
farmers not being supported, et cetera. And so that made me start to dig around a little bit, Lisa, when I started to think about, okay, well then if the American dream that my grandparents, my parents talked about in the past does not fit, then what is the current American dream? So
Right.
that's when I started going down the rabbit trail, Lisa, around what it is
Okay.
now.
Okay.
And
Tell
so
us what you
there's
found.
there's a good list here. So what the acronym is called FIRE for the first one. So financial independence and being able to retire early, right? Creative entrepreneurship. So that's people that are in the TikTok world or Instagram, et cetera. So using creativity to make a living. Having purpose over paycheck. So think about our nonprofit leaders, our religious leaders, and other folks that see a greater cause for their work.
Okay.
Alternative housing models, so co-living, tiny homes, van life. I even follow some folks that live out of their cars intentionally, for
Mm-hmm.
several reasons. Gig economy, so freelance work that's cobbled together to make a living. Sustainable living, I kind of equate that to green living, but I know I'm oversimplifying that. Digital nomadism, meaning let's just downsize everything, Lisa, and you and I live out of one big suitcase and a backpack and live all over the world doing what we do digitally. Mindful consumption, being aware of how we consume, hopefully zero waste everything.
Okay.
Um, Side hustle life, so meaning that you just get used to having a 9 to 5 and something else, and it's very rare to only have a 9 to 5 and nothing else. Activism from an intersectional level. So it's not only I'm supporting women, but I'm supporting women of color in corporate environments that are in the C-suite. Like it's becoming very layered
Right.
systemically with the activism. Wellness over wealth, meaning I am not going to kill myself and literally be in a hospital somewhere and not be able to enjoy my wealth because y'all have stressed me out so badly.
Mm-hmm.
So, that tipping point. Relationship success, meaning that personal and professional relationships are more important than, let's say, closing the deal or the bottom line. And then the last one is my favorite: imperfection acceptance, meaning that we're no longer going to feed into some of these requirements around having to be perfect in order to be valuable or relevant. And so, with that, I'm like, Lisa, I want to know how you feel about this whole American dream piece, knowing that, obviously, not being born and raised here, but possibly even hearing about romanticized versions of this as well outside of the US.
Yep.
What do you
Yep.
think about this list? Because it's a game changer for me as someone who's born and raised here. It's like, oh, I need more than this podcast to think about this list, is what I'm saying, Lisa. So I'm interested to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on it.
So the argument being that the kind of classic or quote unquote traditional American dream that has been marketed for generations plural is no
Mm-hmm.
longer relevant or appropriate or even attainable. So it's being supplanted by this new list that you just read. Okay. I mean,
Exactly.
I think about, I mean, I definitely, I mean, my undergraduate studies were, like I'd said, political science and American studies. So I think the American
Mm-hmm.
dream, American exceptionalism was certainly romanticized in the way that it was taught. It's possible I wasn't paying attention. It's almost certain that I didn't have the same level of critical thinking capacity then as I do now, right? So it's possible I just missed some of this stuff, but certainly it is an idealized, this idea that anyone can make it in America, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
fundamental narrative that is associated with the United States of America. And one of the arguments as to why so many people have voted for Trump is because that American dream is no longer attainable, right? And to your point, people are buried under debt. They can't own a house. They're not real. There's no upward mobility. They may live in environments where the primary profession, particularly in the Rust Belt, has deteriorated, right, as those jobs have moved overseas or they've just changed because of the rise of technology and AI more recently. So I guess that does necessitate a shift in how we understand the American dream. But the American dream, and I think you'll agree with me, was never available to everyone anyway, right? So
Say it louder, Lisa. Say it louder. Exactly. But keep going. Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
so if it wasn't available to everyone, was it really an American, fully American dream, right? Because not everyone was able to attain it. So then I'm looking at this list and I'm thinking that these are, I guess, these are more likely behaviors, situations, life goals to be attained, right? Like I'm not going to earn as much as my parents did. I may never be able to own a home. So I'm going to flip that from, rather than being frustrated that I don't earn enough, interest rates are too high, housing is pricing me out, I'm going to be a digital nomad, right? Like I am going to actually say that freedom to travel, see the world, still earn a living rather than be tied to mortgage debt
Yes.
is a new version of the American dream.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yes.
it's interesting to me. So like this list is under the title of The American Dream Feels Dead. Here's what's replacing it. Do you understand that to mean these 13 items you just recounted are the new American dream, or are you understanding it to mean that the whole concept of there being a dream tied to living in the United States of America is just gone completely? Like that is just a dead concept. There's no point even talking about it that way. Here are
Mm.
some other things that you should look to attain. Like how do you understand the list, or how are you conceiving of it? Yeah.
Yeah, great point. For me, when I read the list, I was thinking to myself, "Ooh, this is very interesting," because even if we're thinking about this list, I don't want to think about it in a, how can I say, a all or nothing approach to the list, meaning that if you don't have some semblance of all of these things, then you have not acquired the American dream. But it's kind of hinting at what the American dream could be if you have one or more, several of these elements as part of your lifestyle. And so with that, I'm like, this is interesting because, of course, it's not decided yet as to, what would solidly be the American dream. But again, if we were going back to your point around folks that really this was not attainable for so many people in this country based on its foundation, if we base it upon that, then I feel like these 13 or so things are yet again feeding into that liberty piece of, guess what, y'all? The American dream doesn't have to be singularly defined. here are some trends that we see that you can use to help you define things as you like, but it doesn't have to be this cookie cutter approach to what the American dream could be. And
Okay.
so
Okay.
I felt very comfortable with thinking about that because it ushers in a very different conversation about releasing people to think about the American dream in different ways and not just have
Mm-hmm.
one right way. So, for example, I reflect back to my childhood where, some of those concepts were, of course, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and, you know, a let me get very detailed here, a heterosexual couple
Mm-hmm.
being legally married with this type of house,
Yep.
single family, what have you, this size property or land with the white picket fence and the
Mm-hmm.
2.3 children that you probably conceived by traditional methods
Right.
and a dog and all of these things where it's just very singularly defined. And so it really does turn the definition on its head to say, well, wait a minute, that definition never worked for most people.
Yeah.
So why define it at all? And so I like that it's giving us, here's a hint as to direction. Here's 13 directions you can go in regards to building your own American dream, but we're releasing you from thinking it has to be one way. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
about the list, because someone could read this list. This list was published in late May. This list, whether you accept all of it or none of it, I think the American dream conversation in and of itself should be queried, because think about, okay, Lisa, let me be petty for just a quick second. So the pettiness in me thinks about how many conversations we've had, parallel conversations that we've had in this country about uh, the pros and cons of being quote unquote woke, right?
Right.
Well, what if the folks that are really quote unquote woke call the bluff of the American dream, right? That
Mm-hmm.
we're awake enough to realize, like you mentioned at the top of your time, we're woke enough to realize that this dream has never been attainable for anyone. So let's call the bluff of the dream and either dismantle it, rebuild it, or remove the pressure from American citizens to feel the need to climb up to attain this Denali, if you will. No, you shouldn't have to.
Yeah, so it's not a like throwing away of American dream as a vessel, but the contents of the vessel are should be changed because one, the kind of old version of it was not attainable, and two, our entire culture, economic, political environment has shifted
Mm-hmm.
in so much as there's all these different ways of being in the world. That's interesting. Because I
Mm-hmm.
just think about the way the American dream and this like romanticized image of it is fueling right wing populism, and how so many people are
Mm-hmm.
voting with this like mythical return to a time that where these things were more attainable, whereas this list feels more realistic, practical,
Mm.
recognizing of the ways in which our society has changed. And so this like going back to a return to an environment where this classic American dream or the components of it were attainable, um, misreads, I think, kind of our
Mm-hmm.
current present day reality about what is even possible, right? Like manufacturing is not coming back to the United States in the way that it was, right? Like people
Mm.
are not going to
That's
be,
right.
the undergraduate degree does not have the same weight as it did before. It
That's right.
costs too
Mm-hmm.
much money to get an undergraduate degree, so less people are getting it. I think we talked about this before, that the US
Yeah.
is no longer has no longer the highest percentage of people with an undergraduate degree because costs now have
Mm-hmm.
become so prohibitive.
That's
So
right.
how do we, so it's a lie, right? I guess where I'm talking around is that this is not, it's a lie to say to people that we need to go back, because if we go back, you can attain the American dream as it is kind of
Mm.
functionally or traditionally defined.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that is fueling the current right wing shift when it's just a lie. And what your list is essentially illuminating is these are the things that are more relevant and attainable now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
More
agree with that?
relevant.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, more relevant, more attainable, more, how can I say? Yeah, more relevant, more attainable, more I keep going back to more diverse because it's true, but more
Yeah.
malleable and attainable. Because here's the thing, I always wonder whether these uh, phrases like the American dream, I always wonder if they're situated, like think about American dream or think about words like work-life balance or these
Mm-hmm.
other words and phrases that at the core of them, they are mostly like you are the outlier if you even think that you've attained any of these. Um, and sometimes I wonder if that's purposeful to get people to either strive towards or spin towards or posit someone to feel differently on this stratification of power. Like these words are selected in such intentional ways.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I always wonder if it's intentionally selected out of reach. Intentionally.
Oh yeah, probably. Yeah.
And that's what I think this whole thing is calling out is that we're no longer uh what is it? We're no longer falling for the what is it? The banana in the tailpipe where you made us think that we could attain this and we're less than if we don't. And we're not fully American if we don't. We're not falling for that anymore when the structures that are built around us have made it almost impossible for us to do so. So, when there's been a couple of podcasts that I listened to this last week. Haha, y'all know me and Lisa are podcast addicts. But I was listening to a podcast where this gentleman was talking about the tax code and he had filed taxes and just kind of reflecting on that with his tax preparer. And they both said when your tax accountant is unsure about certain codes, we can't help but question whether the system itself is built to ensure confusion, which then disenfranchise taxpayers and further, what's the opposite of disenfranchise? Enfranchises the
Mm-hmm.
country because they benefit from our confusion, lack of knowledge, lack of ability to attain whatever this code is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not trying to say this is a conspiracy theory at all. I am saying I see systems that are set in ways that don't allow people to attain things intentionally.
Yeah, and it's keeping people's heads turned backwards versus forwards, right? So all of those folks who want to go backwards because they are so emotionally and
Mm,
otherwise attached to this idea of the kind of traditional American dream,
mm-hmm,
rather than encouraging that they turn around and be like, okay, that's not what this is anymore. How about I try these other things, right? There, that
uh-huh,
backward looking emotional connection is being
mm-hmm,
inflamed purposefully and intentionally, to your point, right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah. And
mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, very intentionally. And, to that point, what's unfortunate is that for those of us who may see these systems that disenfranchise folks that are trying to attain this mythical thing, we get dismissed as, well, you're just frustrated because you didn't work hard enough to get the
Yeah.
family
Yeah.
with the big house and the white picket fence. And it's like, no, 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 no. Let me be very clear. I'm just using this as one example of many. No, I've had that. I've had the heterosexual marriage, family, children,
Yeah. Yeah.
the pet, the fence and everything. And I'm still saying that this is not attainable or sustainable for most people.
Right. Right.
So I appreciate how folks are starting to query what they thought they knew as fundamental.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, it's like inspecting the foundation of your house. Like usually you,
Yep.
you walk around not thinking about it. It's like, we need to look at this thing because it is cracked up. It is not
Yep.
safe around here. Because what we thought was a foregone conclusion is
Yes.
not, and maybe has never been a foregone
Right.
conclusion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a fabulous way to end this phase. I loved how you finished that off. Definitely going to be thinking about this for a little while longer.
Me too. Me too. Hmm.
um, all right. So let's go ahead and shift into phase two here. All right. So this is a riff on an NPR piece that I came across a few days ago. And we've talked before, Shaunna, about the number of diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals who are being let go. We've also talked about whether or not the murder of George Floyd and the subsequent protests around race, racial discrimination and police brutality to communities of color, particularly Black men and boys. So we've had those conversations previously, and we've also multiple times wondered whether that 2020 racial reckoning was sustainable, right? Because it kind of felt like it was, and there was definitely some media narrative around that, but then it kind of like started to like run out of steam, right? And you started to see corporations and people's behaviors shift. And this predates Trump 2.0, right? So that shift predates Trump 2.0. Anyway, so NPR decided they were going to do this study. So they partnered with a research agency to look at the decline, or well, rather the rise and decline in diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals in the United States. And so what they found is that over the last 2 years, in the region of around 2,600 people who have worked in the DEI industry, or that's been their profession within a corporation or organization, they have lost their jobs and they're really struggling to find additional employment. And even people who have been in those roles successfully, who have retired just because they wanted to retire, not forced or anything, those jobs have not been backfilled, right? So I have some stats here for you, and I'd be curious to hear what you think. So we will link the article because for visual people, it's going to be better for you to look at this. But essentially, they have a bar chart where they list the years and the number of people who are employed in doing DEI related work, right? That doesn't mean that the folks are all chief diversity officers. It's folks kind of doing that work around equity, diversity, and inclusion. So in 2020, there were 12,206 people. 2021, that jumped to 15,520. 2022, it jumped again to 18,990. 2023 jumped again, but less, to 20,048 people. And then we start to come back down. So in 2024, last year, 19,125. And this year, as of May, when they did this, 17,701. So it's a curve, right? It's like it's a hill. The peak being 2023 at just over 20,000 people in the field, and then it's starting to drop down. And so I thought this was just a very interesting research study that they did. And there's a ton more information in this NPR article. They have lots of different graphs and charts. They interview people who have lost their jobs about their struggles with trying to find a job. So it's got both the numbers and it's also got the stories. So I'd highly recommend folks reading that if you have an interest in kind of the larger profession or DEI industry and what's happening, because these are people, these are humans, right, who have families and commitments and debt, to our earlier phase, and they're trying to make the world a better place. And so I was just wondering, Shaunna, what you thought about that, whether those numbers surprised you. I mean, obviously not the dip, but that arc that we're seeing with the peak in 2023 and how we're kind of coming back down that mountain now, based on, fueled by this backlash that DEI is quote unquote illegal, which is just bullshit. Like, it is not illegal.
Yeah.
Like there's not a law that, anyway, that is another topic. So,
oh goodness. Yeah.
So
yeah.
what do you think?
Well, I recently watched this little clip where it was George Floyd's daughter who wants to become a doctor because she wants to give back to communities, and she wants to in some way be a positive light on her community, which we know, Black doctors, most African
Mm-hmm.
Americans want to have a Black doctor, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
So it makes complete sense where she's coming from. And so, Lisa, you and I, our crystal ball is always plugged in and working because we talked about this. We talked about this in the beginning of this podcast arc, in that we were hoping that this bubble would not burst when it came to this uptick in just general DEI activity. And then
Mm-hmm.
let's see who really has a backbone in a few years. And now we're seeing, right?
Right.
Well,
Right.
a few things that are very sad to me. And I will die on this hill, y'all. I've been saying it for years and I'll keep saying it. Lisa, we won't age ourselves, but we just let people know that we've been doing this type of work for decades. Okay. Because of the highlight on what people think DEI is as a soundbite, it has turned into, oh my goodness, there are all these people who are doing DEI activity. And so now that we're shining a light on this DEI activity, then it broadened a little bit to find out, oh my goodness, DEI folks, there are folks out there that do this like 100% for a living.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we cut off some of those programs and activities and initiatives, that slowly but surely eliminates people's entire roles, because what else do
Right.
they do? And so the hill that I'm willing to die on is that, first, number one, people didn't even know what DEI was to begin with until, and frankly, I still think many of them still don't know what it is
Oh,
to this
absolutely.
day. So that's
Absolutely.
number one. They don't know what it is. They think they do. Number two, they found out that specific individuals have job descriptions to do this work. That's the second thing. And so people who are anti-DEI say, if we're going to get rid of the programs and initiatives, we have to get rid of the people who do it. And then the last piece is the realization, when you're sharing this article with me from NPR, it's coming from the enlightened perspective that people know that it is a profession, whether you have a positive or negative viewpoint of the profession itself. People are realizing that it is a profession. And what I would suggest is what you said before around, people are trying to do good work, do good work in the world. The flip side of that is there is a large contingency of folks who think that we are doing bad work in the world and we
Right.
are messing things up for a lot of people. And we are making a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
exclusion and lack of sense of belonging and, homogenous organizations, snow-capped organizations. We have become, I posted recently on my social media, it's a very fine line between who's the hero, who's the villains, and who are the supervillains. And
Mm-hmm.
for some people, people like us have been viewed as the villain for a very long time. But once we had 45, 47-ish perspectives of the world, we then got elevated to supervillains, where it's like, nope, we don't want this work to happen. And so the easiest way to keep the work from happening is to remove, eliminate, not replace the people who do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so unfortunately, the hill I'm willing to die on is that people still don't fully acknowledge the profession of DEI. But unfortunately, the people who now are discovering the profession of DEI don't know what it does. Some of them didn't know how it benefited them until those benefits went away.
Right.
And now DEI professionals and strategists are being known for the wrong reasons. So when I hear people that say, oh, well, it's not fair for certain people to get hired or not get hired, I don't like these DEI policies. I'm like, that is one drop in a larger ocean of understanding diversity, equity, and inclusion. You are speaking from the soundbite you heard from a bunch of professionals that don't know what it is. Even as I listen to podcasts that are hosted by people of color, and as I listen to them talk about DEI, many of them still don't know what DEI is in a large, encompassing way. They think it's about hiring. No
Mm-hmm.
matter what podcast I've listened to, it's been couched in a HR perspective. Let me take that back. It's been couched in a HR and race perspective
Yeah.
rather than larger perspectives across organizations and across identities. And so, this is definitely unfortunate. And at the same time, you and I called it. We called it on this podcast when it was happening. So I can't say that I'm surprised, but I'm still uh, frustrated yet disinterested in trying to educate people on what DEI is, because media and social media, they're winning. They're winning
Yeah.
at misinformation.
It's interesting to me. When you talked about the HR piece and the race piece, that popped into my head this belief that you have really forwarded that a chief diversity officer or someone who's working on inclusion and belonging should not be in human resources, right? So I
Hell no.
wonder
Mm-mm.
if the evolution of professionals in this work within organizations, corporations, big companies being located in human resources has created the problem of this DEI is only about hiring, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or require trainings that are painful to sit through, right? Like
Yes, yes.
because that
Mm-hmm.
is where organizations have decided to put it. They've obviously conceptualized it that way. We're putting it within HR, which has then emanated out into this kind of broader understanding that DEI only means blank. But that one of the women
Mm-hmm.
that is interviewed in the NPR article, her role was vastly bigger than that. I forget exactly all the things that she did, but she's been out of work now for several months and she's been applying for positions that are still being posted. There are some still being posted, but then she'll make it so far in the process and she either won't be successful or they'll notify her, much like some of your contracts, Shaunna, that they're
Mm-hmm.
actually pulling the position like midway through a search. They've decided
Exactly.
not to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about Verizon, who recently had announced that they were ending many of its DEI policies and programs because it needed approval from the FCC so that they could do a $20 billion merger, right? So whether or not they will get the merger, that will all be done and dusted and then they'll go back to it. I don't know, but you can see the ways in which these larger companies are, you can see the priority they put on issues around inclusion in the workplace when they are so willing to ditch it when it comes to their bottom line and thinking about, in Verizon's case, this $20 billion merger, right? Like they're still not really
Mm.
conceptualizing of this work as impacting the bottom line. Like if you
Yeah.
maintain employees that are trying to create inclusive workspaces and
Mm-hmm.
build bridges, create opportunities for dialogue, uncover discrimination regardless of what it is, you are
Mm-hmm.
going to make more money, right? And I feel like there was so much research back in the early 2010s about the return on investment around engaging
Mm.
in these programs, practices, and policies.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, as soon as there is a whiff, right, that
That's right.
there might be some financial harm. I'm looking at you, Target and Home Depot and
Mm-hmm.
Walmart, right, who then retreat rather than digging in, yay, to Costco and the like. Um,
Yeah.
so I just feel like what you're talking about, that demonization that is born of a lack of
Mm-hmm.
understanding, like the human cost, both the humans who are in the roles who are now unemployed, but then also
Yeah.
the human cost within the organizations where there is no longer any concerted or intentional effort to create kinder,
Mm-hmm.
more welcoming workplaces, right? Like there's a
Mm-hmm.
human cost there too. And that's what this
Mm-hmm.
NPR research is trying to get at. And no one else has done it, at least not this year, right? Like recently with all the
Mm-hmm.
changes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. And I was looking for, I can't seem to find it at the moment. I'm going to try to find it. Verizon and T-Mobile both ratcheted down their DEI work. But I was looking for, there's another one that actually ratcheted up their DEI work in
okay.
response. And which leads me to my comment on this is that I agree with everything you just said. And I would like to add that we as DEI strategists, whether you're a chief diversity officer or otherwise, we also need to take some responsibility to, not all, but some responsibility in how we have not um, embrace data in
Okay.
ways that other areas of organizations do. Because if you're an organization that is very heavy on KPIs and delivering very both the narrative, but also the quantitative data points on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and you're still riding off the coattails of, oh, it's the right thing to do and stopping there, then it's going to be even harder to validate and actually show
Yeah.
someone who may not be for,
Hmm.
I mean, they may, there may be a decision maker that's on the fence. But because you brought your numbers in the same way that the COO, the CFO, the CHRO all came in the door, rather
Yeah.
than just riding on it's the right thing to do, then you might have a better case for keeping something that you could. And it's not to say that the data isn't there. It's, have you prioritized that as
Right.
part of your
Right.
DEI strategy? But if you have nothing to report, you can't report good or bad, whether something worked, something was helpful,
Hmm.
what are the outcomes. And so sometimes I feel like, um I wish there was some research on this, maybe it is some out there, but because so many folks that do DEI work are doing it because it's the right thing to do, and additionally there are business cases for doing it right, because we come from that altruistic perspective, we don't always focus on the data language that communicates DEI success. And
Right.
that also becomes a barrier to our own work, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, naming that too, because, I've worked with some folks that were, in a corporate situation. Some of them were blended, like you said before, where they blended HR and DEI. They had plenty of numbers on HR, but they only kind of hinted, kind of, sort of at DEI, rather than
Hmm.
DEI having its own metrics, which, again, if you don't collect the data, then you can't make the case. So I think we need to take some responsibility for that too, because yeah, it is the right thing to do, but uh, even the entrepreneurs that I've heard on various social media outlets, they were won over by data in many ways. I'm thinking about even in higher ed, Lisa, our stomping grounds, where presidents and boards said, initially I was against this, but once somebody showed me the numbers of how we retain
Right.
folks, or how much money we lose because our underrepresented faculty are turning over so quickly, we can't replace them quickly enough. Once you started connecting the dots for them, it wasn't like you eliminated all the problems, but you surely helped yourself out quite a bit in that way. So
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
that's part of it too.
Yeah, so I think that there's, I mean, this is just going to continue apace. I would imagine we're going to see more companies fold and these numbers. I don't know
Mhm.
if NPR is going to work with the research company to continue to update their numbers. Obviously, 2025 is not yet over, and we
Mhm.
have already dropped 1,500 from 2024. So, of all the companies in the United States, that may not seem like a lot, but it's a significant number of probably the companies that were doing some kind of initiative that are backtracking, right? Like, because not every company was doing this. So there's a percentage of the overall amount that were, and then of that, we've lost 1,900 since last year. And it's
Mhm.
continuing to drop, whether or not we'll go below those 2020 numbers. So I guess the silver lining here is 2020, there were 12,000 people doing this work. And in 2025, there are
Mhm.
still close to 18,000 people doing this work. So we are still in a better place in terms of the people doing the work than we were in
Mhm.
2020.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
still, I worry that we're continuing that downward trend. And I mean, I think we just can't forget the
That's it. That's
like
it.
who the harm that is being created here. And so that's why I kind of wanted to highlight this NPR research and the kudos for actually bringing it to light, because
Mhm.
again, with the federal
Mhm.
cuts, right? The federal workforce is being cut, and we're hearing like 10,000 here, 5,000 here, and maybe as many as 200,000. Oh no, but that court order has stopped them. They need to be reemployed. There's not like a clear
Yeah.
understanding about how many people are now unemployed, what that does to
That's
them
right.
as an individual, their family, their workplaces, but then also the employment market, right? And
That's right.
unemployment percentages and what does it mean to get rehired and all of that. And I think that is just
Mhm.
missed because we
Absolutely.
abstract it and we just talk about it
Absolutely.
unintelligently, right? So
Yes, 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 yes. When all this started happening, especially on the federal and state level, I remember talking to my parents, family and friends that don't live here in the DMV area, and I remember specifically being relatively sharp with them to say, this is not just a ticker tape going across the bottom of your news
right.
tonight.
Yeah.
This is my friend, pick a name, my friend Susie, my friend Tim, my friend Doug. I'm trying to put names with these numbers, that these are real people that don't know where their checks are going to be coming from moving forward to have a livelihood. And these are not, you know, inexperienced people, young people, what have you. These are folks that have built an entire career around these areas that y'all didn't know about 2 years ago, that now
Yeah.
have to figure it out. So,
Yeah.
yep. So, all right. Well, look,
All right.
we have once again brought y'all some interesting topics for you to chew on for a while with no answers, but that's the goal, is to make you think. So
Yep.
with
Yep.
that, let me wrap up this episode of Unfazed Unedited. Please make sure that you follow us on all your social media platforms and your podcast apps at Unfazed Unedited. You certainly can email us at info@unfazedpodcast.com, or visit our website, unfazedpodcast.com, where you can access all of our old and our new shows. So please, if you like this week's episode, we keep bringing you new stuff, new topics, then like, subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends or coworkers, and anyone in this phase of your life. So we're still marching to 200, right,
Yes,
Lisa?
we are. Yes, we are.